All right, and welcome back to the Big Cheese AI podcast. I'm going to be your host today, Brandon Corbin, because Sean is tired. Sean has just returned from Puerto Rico. So today I'm joined with the normal people. We've got Sean Hise, we've got Jacob Wise, and then our guest, this is the normal, I apologize, I break things all the time. And our guest today is Dr. Aaron Shaver, who is the CEO of Prompt Privacy. And if you've ever listened to the show, you've heard me drop the name Prompt Privacy multiple times. And that is because I've been working with Prompt Privacy now for, 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. So Dr. Aaron Shaver, welcome to the Big Cheese Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And so today we're going to be talking about autonomous AI. But first we need to get through some of our news topics. And I hope you all are prepared. Sean, I know you are definitely prepared.
I'm ready to go
for our news. So we're going to run through it first. Anything you guys want to jump into before we get started?
Yeah, I can jump in. I was doing the Microsoft, I don't know, Volley.
Volley.
Yeah, that's their, it's so.
They didn't even it was Volley 3, right? And like they're not even trying to disseminate from Dolly.
Right. They were like, it's close. It's the Microsoft naming team again. They're back at it. They're really good. It's a recording, takes your voice, and then they can reproduce it with like 2 seconds of recording and do really good job.
Wait, so they can only generate 2 seconds?
No.
Train off of 2
training,
seconds.
thank you.
Oh,
I got words today. They can record 2 seconds of your voice, and then they can reproduce it accurately off of that.
Wow.
And they haven't released it because it's too scary or whatever.
I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Don't answer your phone, people.
No.
Well, but it brings up a very interesting point, right? Is that you can't so we've always talked about synthetic data is going to be a problem. Like it's going to be the new malware. Right, where you could hypothetically, if I can, I've got plenty of recordings of Aaron here. I could absolutely take it, train it, and then send a message to some employee and be like, "Hey, if you guys could go to Target and buy me a couple gift cards, and send those to me because I'm stuck out in Belize or wherever." I mean, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting, there's been so many data leaks, and you can tell if your data's been leaked because you start getting random texts and calls from numbers that you may not have had before. And they're really trying to get you to confirm some of the information now, right? They're trying, hey, is it just making sure this is Sean, right?
Yeah.
Like, do not respond to that, by the way. Because they have like your email and your
Just forward them your social.
You know what I mean? They're just
get to the point.
But the thing that does scare me is they're trying, maybe some of them I feel like are trying to get you to pick up the phone so they can get that recording.
I think so, absolutely.
And there's no way around it. Like they were talking about embedding what the hell do you call
Watermarks.
it? Yeah, watermarks. But you remember audio? Did anyone ever use Audio Jungle?
Oh yeah, you'd have your music.
That sounds really
Audio
really
Jungle
weird.
1.0. Every 5 minutes there would be that voice that would come in and overlay.
So like if your boss asks you to buy a gift card and then it says Audio Jungle,
I did have
don't do it.
No, so one of the clients that I was working with, I did get a message from the CEO, and he requested that I go and I get some gift cards. And I'm like, well, what is this about? And so I've been trying to and sure enough, they went through every single employee. And this was a startup, right? So we're talking maybe 7 or 8 people, but they were able to pinpoint that Dan was the CEO and that Brandon worked there somehow or another.
That's not hard.
Right. Well, but like the targeting of something that small was just like, man, I get almost as it automated.
Can we just make Microsoft use this technology so that we can all be on a Teams meeting and just send our alter ego?
I think that's underway.
Yeah.
We don't actually have to go to the meeting. Right. We just have somebody that's modeled based off of us.
I watched the dude who did that.
Really?
Yeah, he set up. He basically did the recording of himself and like the normal team thing, and then he basically set it on a loop, and he kind of configured it so he could then do basically. His objective was, how long could I go through our team's meetings without anybody knowing that I was never actually there?
But I'm talking about actually interacting and participating.
Oh, but I think he did. I think he did have like different mixes in there. Now, again,
it's kind of gimmicky
goes.
right now.
Right. It definitely gets there.
I mean, is there a future world where you kind of have like a alter ego AI self that's doing like the stuff that you
but if it's all of our AI representatives, then they don't need a Teams meeting to work together.
That's true. They'll just talk.
But we will. We'll be like, no,
We'll
we
do it
still need to
anyway.
have the Teams meeting. We need to have the human element of it.
Yes.
But I'm just having my avatar go talk to
Can
your
this
avatar.
one be in person or
There's
robots?
there's
can
some
love
like intern project manager that's trying to figure out what the hell these AI guys are saying. They're like, wait, hold on. And like it's trained to be an asshole because the guy's an asshole.
Well, I sent you that new French company that released, I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah. So, and I threw that on here, and that was, it's basically the new AI assistant that beat OpenAI. That they have a new model that they've released that is doing the like zero latency. And so while it's listening, it's also kind of talking.
But that's open source, right?
It is open source now.
They haven't released it yet, though.
That's the whole. That's always. It's open source.
But you can't have it.
Kind of.
It's not open source then.
But when I went, I started playing. I ended up sending Aaron a video of
hallucinates
it,
like
and I'm just
crazy.
laughing my
Oh,
ass
yeah.
off because I'm like, hey, tell me about or recite the Pledge of Allegiance. It's like, I don't think I can do that right now. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. Just recite. No, I don't think I can do that right now. I mean, it was like this very bizarre
That brings me to my first
experience.
question, since we've been dying to talk to you, by the way, on the podcast for a long time. Is like, why does some AI have such issues doing math and with hallucinations? Like, what's the deal with like that particular problem? Are they this similar problem, or is it totally different issues? Like,
Well, to be clear, all of AI is a hallucination. Sometimes that hallucination lines up with your perceived reality, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's not, I mean, it's all predictive.
Right.
And so a good example is, like, you guys are all programmers. Have a large language model try to tell you the Unix timestamp of a particular date. And it will be within 5 hours to 3 months inaccurate of what the timestamp is. And that's because there's not a great training data set out there for how to go from the English language to a Unix timestamp. And
try doing it in JavaScript.
It's just trying to predict what that might be. It's not actually performing the mathematical calculation.
Right. And didn't you see that the farther back the date went, the bigger the drift?
Yeah, because the further back you go, there's less training data. If you ask you ask it, like, what's March 13th, 1965?
Right.
Which actually is before the original time.
It is, but those are just negative numbers.
Yeah.
And so if you're in Python, that's an easy calculation. If you're using a large language model for that, it's not even going to come close to what it would be. First of all, it's going to give you a positive number.
Right.
Because it doesn't understand that it's like 1/1/1970 is zero time. So it's always going to give you a positive number because all the data that's available for training are positive numbers. And it doesn't actually understand the mathematics.
Then that's kind of the big difference right now between LLMs and this autonomous AI, where they're trying to be more like a human, because humans have the ability to plan their problem solving. They have the ability to utilize tools. And like you're talking about an LLM, like it's not gonna, when you ask it to go do convert the Unix timestamp, it's not going to its timestamp calculator tool.
Yeah, but what's
right?
stopping it from that? Because like it should, and
Nothing,
Google's trying to do
that's
things like
the
that,
whole,
right?
That's the whole concept, right? Is
Yeah.
that they're going to start using those tools. And
to be clear though, it can't.
It can't.
It in and of itself can't.
It in and of itself doesn't have the agency
Sure.
or the ability to go access a set of tools. We have to give it those tools and give it the impetus to use them.
Right.
But in practice, like, isn't that the biggest, the advancement was LLMs, but then there's also an assumption maybe that it is using these tools or it is doing this thing.
Well, yeah, it's like,
you know what I mean? But
when we
it's
talk
not.
about ChatGPT, right, is that, so you have ChatGPT, the model, or GPT-4, the model, but then you have the way that you're interfacing with it, right? And that interface, that they've got so much like code just sitting on top of before we ever even hit the LLM. So there's just a lot, like, again, raw dogging an LLM you're going to have one result, but then you have the kind of the thing on top, which is the tools, which is the saying, hey, first I want you to go and identify what tool should I hypothetically use for this user's prompt, right? And then, oh, hey, he wanted to calculate a timestamp. I see that I've got a timestamp tool in my array of tools, and so I can just send that to there, get the results back, and I can answer that, right? But again, that's all of the things that we sit on top of these large language models. But yeah, well, I think you called it a super advanced autocomplete.
Yeah, I mean,
is basically what these LLMs are, right? They're just super advanced autocomplete systems.
Yeah, I mean, that's the basic transformer architecture, is that they're just predicting the next token in a sequence and then trying to manage a certain type of attention with that.
Yeah. And now we did see, so we had one of the clients that we were out where we were doing the AI immersion, and I think we did talk about this a little bit on the podcast, is that we did find that like Gemini 1.5 Pro was better at kind of like discerning data elements from these kind of prompts versus ChatGPT, right? Like, so nobody in that team ended up using ChatGPT for the work that they wanted. And the one company who was trying to basically parse out, or the one team who was trying to parse out like CSV data and trying to extract some meaning from it, they ended up just completely blowing away ChatGPT, replacing it with Gemini. And we're like, Gemini worked great. And that was the problem, is that ChatGPT sucked, is what they said. That was the problem.
So we do like pretty broad immersions where we take just business users and give them access to tools and challenge statements to go kind of solve their own problems. And less than 10% of the time people pick ChatGPT as the model that they use. You can see really in kind of more of the human-related departments, you know, if you're talking about like sales or marketing or human resources, where it's very reliant on copywriting, they really love the Anthropic models.
Right.
If it's, hey, we're like logistics, supply chain, IT, security, anything that's more of these harder sciences, they love the Google Gemini models. And that really just is, it's not a function of architecture, it's a function of training data sets that they've been provided. And probably the guardrails and shadow prompting that those vendors are injecting into the models.
Right. Are any of you, so like what models are you guys currently using for like your day-to-day work?
Claude, Sonnet.
Have you kind of migrated to Claude versus OpenAI?
Mostly because I started paying for it, but you know, I still have a tendency to copy and paste to all three of the major ones.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Just to see.
Are you finding one that you kind of prefer over the others?
If I'm like trying to start from scratch and like code stuff, Claude.
Okay.
But ChatGPT for most general purposes.
Yeah. ChatGPT, the 4.0 is just so damn chatty. That's my only problem with it. It just won't shut up. But I'm like, dude, stop outputting the entire code. I just need you to output the one like tiny thing.
I think 4.0 has been perfectly fine for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. 4.0, like I got mad at it yesterday because I was trying to do some Zoom integration stuff. And I'm like, no, the scope is not there. Quit telling me it's available. Yeah. And then finally they were like, here's the web page I found that it is there, actually. And I was like, damn it. They're right. You have to enable this other scope for it to show up, though, which is helpful. But I
find that the thing that continues to amaze me with 4.0, and I know the other tools are just as good, like Anthropic, Claude, whatever, is just the ability to write code that works in languages I don't know. Like I was doing some Python work because I got an idea, and I just tested it out, and I had a working app in a couple minutes.
Have you noticed
I would never have done
that degradation in Copilot at all?
I don't use
Mine's.
I find that my issue, I'm more like you when it comes to the coding. Like I don't like it in the IDE because I haven't found a good interface for that to happen.
Yeah,
like it just doesn't feel right. So I'm like continuing to utilize the chat prompt and have a conversation with it and then bring that stuff in and out.
Yeah. The only thing I really use Copilot for now is if I have a terminal error that I can copy and paste into the chat feature and be like, okay, given my code and this error, where should I go first?
And I've had some regressions too. Like I used to have a really good autocomplete.
Yeah, autocomplete sucks all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's terrible now.
I don't know.
So that's a very concerning point here. I think that's worthy of a discussion, which is that no updates to the model. Again, we've all been using 4.0. I assume that's been using 4.0 or whatever it is. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it seems that it just starts to fall apart. Right, like that starts to degrade. It starts to not get. Now, is that a scalability issue?
Yeah,
like, what actually causes it to start to really degrade over time? Because again, as you and I have talked about a lot, is that when we have an enterprise, right? Enterprises are going when enterprises really start to leverage AI in their operations, they're going to have to be able to really report on these, right? They're going to need to be able to say, this is the model that we're using, here's the prompt that we're using, here's the data that we're using, and that we can validate that all of this is actually accurate. But when all of a sudden these external models are starting to kind of drift or fade or whatever the hell is going on, that seems like it could be a really big problem for the entire market. Do you have any thoughts on how that is happening?
Yeah. I mean, especially as we move away from like the whole zero shot chat style. I mean, that's fine for maybe some more sophisticated folks, or if you're trying to just solve casual problems. But you really wouldn't want somebody in a clinical or a business setting, performing, producing financial reports out of a chat style LLM.
Right.
Because there's very discrete like business rules that we have to follow. And so when you build out that symbolic reasoning about how to produce a P&L or how to, validate 2 invoices, it's kind of like playing Clue, where it's like Colonel Mustard in the kitchen with the candlestick, right? You have to say it's Gemini 1.5 of a particular release train with this in-context learning with that retrieval augmentation of data. And that has to remain relatively static. Mm-hmm. If you change any one of those components, really that prompt or agent needs to go through revalidation to make sure that it's producing results that are consistent with the rules that are in place. And so that's where, for business purposes, we prefer models that don't drift.
Yeah.
I'd rather not have streaming fine-tuning with the latest web scrape data, because that's going to create that drift in those model weights. I'd rather have it be static and then control the retrieval augmentation of the data so that we can make sure.
Yeah, in those cases, if you're trying to do something that you're going to put your company's financials on, it would have to be static, right? I mean, you would have to be able to have a control. You would have to.
But that's like with any tool. I mean, if it was a hammer and you picked it up and it was different, different length,
different weight.
It was a ball peen versus a claw.
But I also think that the way that's used is also consistent with the way people are currently using it, which is they're just trying to get stuff generally done quicker.
Right. Yeah.
Like we're talking about building and automating like business processes.
Well, so healthcare is a big area.
Autonomous,
So for whatever reason, they're all going
tasks.
after healthcare, right? Like, so IBM made an announcement that they're going after healthcare. OpenAI made an announcement.
Well, why are they going after healthcare? Because that's where all the money is.
Yeah, I know that's where all the money is, right?
Yeah, I don't know about that, guys. I've worked in healthcare a bunch. They're straight up broke.
Oh yeah.
Well, depends what side, payer or provider.
Right, but
I mean, if you want to talk about pharma, that's where the money's at.
Sure. But I mean, again, they're all like kind of starting to set up these operations to basically be able to do healthcare. I mean, it seems like for me personally, like out of all the things that we could go and try to pick to go, like maybe healthcare should be, I don't know, 3rd or 4th. Like, let's get something that's not necessarily, because again, we've seen the horror stories of what happens when like I can't remember, it may have been like episode 5 or 6.
If you tell a health insurance company that they're going to be able to pay 20% less or have 20% less claims, or pay 20% less, or if you go tell a drug company that they're going to be able to enhance their drug pipeline by whatever, they're going to give you money, right? I mean, you're going
right.
So that's where the reason why I would see that. But yeah, I mean, I would hesitate to say that might be the right move in terms of like, risk or society.
One of the areas that I know that kind of came up while we were kind of talking through some of the healthcare stuff, there's areas of being able to predict like how fast people are coming in and out of the hospital. Like those types of things seem to be ones that are a little bit less problematic if something goes awry.
Like, to your point, they're the ones that don't have the money to pay that.
Yeah, but that's we got to be clear in healthcare though, because we're treating it like it's one thing, and it's not.
It's all.
I mean, because you have the business administration of healthcare, you have clinical administration, which is what you're talking about, like discharge and reception. But then you have actual clinical care delivery. And there are different risk tolerances and different benefits in those subsegments of it. And so it's different to think about how do we use AI in general finance practices in healthcare. That's kind of the same as every other business.
Sure.
Or maybe you're doing like claims reconciliation. That's more of a business process that's fine-tuned for clinical aspects. But when you go into a clinical decision support system for a physician to help like recommend drugs or treatments, that's a different risk tolerance.
Yeah.
But like it's like a risk reward kind of thing. So
yeah, risk being you could accidentally kill someone. Reward being you could save someone with an idea that you might not have.
It depends on how you look at risk, though. I think the big risk in that area is will physicians and caregivers actually accept that tool. You could invest $100 million in a model, and then they just say, we're not interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is the path to revenue on that?
True. And coming back to the difference between the LLM and the autonomous agent trying to truly replace somebody's job is, it's not just the information, right, that they read in the book. It's their experience and their interpretation of their own experience and those memories that they have that influence their decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
But now you're getting into reasoning processes.
Right.
Yeah. And if you've met one doctor's diagnostic reasoning, you've met one doctor's diagnostic reasoning. It's not like they all go to med school and are like, okay, we're going to think about problems the same way.
Right.
And so like when you move towards that level of personalization of artificial intelligence, the consumer needs to see it represent their own belief system and values and thought processes and decision making.
Right.
And
that's kind of interesting because a lot of people have that qualm when they go to the doctor and they have a serious issue. It's like they might have a specific experience they've had with cancer in their family and how it was treated.
Absolutely.
And they might want that to be implemented in what they're doing. And
well, there's also like cultural sensitivities, right? And religious sensitivities. And when we have like these, like one of the downfalls for me about just like these overfit general purpose LLMs is that's based on the flawed assumption that we're all going to think about things the same way. And that's never going to happen, right? And does that mean that we then like train an LLM for every person? Like that also doesn't seem like that's going to happen either.
Why is my LLM so paranoid?
So what you're saying is it's not hallucinating. I just don't understand its thought process.
It's just crazy.
But like if you overfit a model, let's say we all everyone in the world agreed to use ChatGPT, and like, like how do you reconcile the differences between Christians and Muslims or Democrats and Republicans? Like these are existential problems we're not going to reconcile with an LLM.
Right.
And so when we start to move closer and closer to those more humanistic applications, we have to look beyond just like the predictive train. You can't get from big data to cognitive reasoning, right? Our data doesn't represent our reasoning. So if I gave you all of my financial transactions, you guys could relatively quickly fire up SageMaker, train a predictive model on it. What you can tell me is why I made the decision to spend that money. And so there's situations where like we're all kind of under this like shared delusion that if we collect enough data, we can figure out how everyone makes their decisions. Which means we cannot use AI in situations that have sparse data.
Yeah.
But that's what AGI is purported to be. If it's going to have the general intelligence of a human, it has to be able to work in environments with sparse data, which means it has to apply inductive and deductive reasoning processes. And LLMs don't do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, could they ever, because a lot of LLMs are plausible, right? Like we look at their output and we're like, okay, it looks plausible. I'm wondering if the future of AGI is really not real, but it's plausible emotional reactions and kind of how they reason about things, right? Like you can inject chaos into it, and then the output is like, well, I guess that that person was a little bit unpredictable, like we are, right?
Yeah. But that's where we get into neurosymbology of how do we like we have to teach AIs to think about our environment and our world the way we think about our environment and world, because in order to represent our belief systems and our viewpoints, it doesn't mean it's correct.
Yeah.
That means that's a barrier to user adoption that we have, is we have to feel like it represents us.
Right.
In order for us to have those like truly, like you said, reasoning type experiences or situations where you're going to give something a lot of responsibility, is it going to have to really like follow you along personally or follow your business along for the ride, like, and just like build up that knowledge with you?
Well, I think that's an interesting discussion of the state of the industry is, and I was telling Brandon this earlier, we work with a huge global auto manufacturer. And as we've gone through, like everyone's really concerned about their data, right? Of like, is it secure and is it private? And that's like, if you're doing it right, it's a bit of a non-issue. But then as we're like building out all of these agents, like one of their attorneys came back and they were like, so based on what we've learned, we should be concerned about the security of our cognitive reasoning, like the way we think about things, not as much can somebody get to our data or not. Because that's really what embodies like how we operate as humans and as organizations, and the culture and the success or failure that's driven out of that. And so we call it like cognitive architecture or designer thinking. In the past, you had to like go out and hire the smartest people or the most intelligent or the most well-educated. But if I can custom design a cognitive reasoning process and give that to you in an agent or a prompt, you can use it at massive scale for low cost.
Right.
And that is the transformational power of artificial intelligence. But that means we have to catalog and design and curate cognitive reasoning,
Which hasn't been,
which is what we work on. Like this is the path to AGI. And I would argue that because, you know, you guys have worked on what we would consider perception models. So we don't get into the like, is it an LLM or is it an NLP? Like there's so much religion around what you call it. We just like broadly group them in like optical character recognition and certain forms of NLP. We would call those perception models.
Okay.
And then when we get into different forms of LLM and transformer based, we would call those comprehension models. And so these are different categories and different ways. And if you look in the human brain, this is how the human brain works as well. Like if I gave you an OCR model, if you just trained it, would it ever become a comprehension model? No, like it has one job, and its job is to be able to read characters and perceive them, and would never come to the point of comprehension. And so there's higher layers of proto-cognition that we have to look at. And there is no amount of fitting or training that you can give an LLM where it becomes a projection model or a direction model or an action model. These are different types of AI that work together with language models.
So really where we're at is broadly is that the LLM came in and brought that different type of model and that interaction. And in order for us to get to AGR, get to where we want to go, we have to build something even more sophisticated.
I won't even say it's more sophisticated. There's just more work to be done.
All right.
I mean,
So it's not going to require some unbelievable advancement in computing
so I'm kind of curious.
Like,
do you think we get to an AGI?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have a prediction of when that might happen, roughly? 5,
which
10,
stock
20.
should I buy?
You know, I don't think it's a matter of compute limitations.
Yeah.
I think we have the computing horsepower. I think it's an issue of industry focus. If you think the organizations that have been the most successful in comprehension models, their mission, if you look at Google's mission, it's to gather and organize the world's data. We have organizations that are now, hey, it's our mission to gather and organize the world's cognitive reasoning.
Who are those companies?
These are all like
Stealth
startups
right.
today.
So people are out in that problem space.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. It's essentially just like we use web scrapers to like harvest your data. We have new AI models and technology that harvest your cognitive reasoning of like, how did you come to these conclusions? And how do we create the neurosymbology in code and models to repeat that? So when it makes a decision, because you guys have all gotten results from a model and are like, explain how you came to that conclusion. And it just is like, I'm sorry. It like just apologizes that it was wrong.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry, you're right. That is the wrong answer. I'm like, I didn't say it was the wrong answer. I just want you to explain how you came to that.
It is so funny when you get a response from the prompt and then you start trying to coach it a little bit.
Yeah.
It almost always tries to immediately correct it.
It's a total little bitch. It's like,
like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, I didn't even really ask you to. Here's the updated code that does. No, wait. I was just
From
saying.
a psychology perspective, we're like, you've had a very traumatic childhood, haven't you?
Such a people pleaser.
A lot of
Jesus.
trauma in that.
I mean, how
LLM.
much of that comes down to the way it was either trained or the reinforcement piece, or was it really just kind of the layers on top before you get to the
so it's a combination of it's a few things. It's first of all, like if you just look at the data it's trained on, it's all like a huge portion of it's from the public internet. And if you've met people on the internet, they're kind of bitches. So there's that, right? That's inherent.
Right.
Then it's been fine-tuned with reinforcement learning to like coach it to the zeitgeist of our era. But then there's shadow prompting on top of all of it.
Which is what we talk about a
You
lot.
put all of that together, and we've kind of like neutered a bunch of the capabilities.
All right. Right.
Now, so we talk about and explain the concept of reasoning and all that, but if we talk about, really autonomously getting things done, the thing that's always interested me the most is the tooling and the interaction with the real world. Mm-hmm. And, in order for me to get my job done, I don't just get out a piece of, shit. I don't just talk. Right, I don't just get out a pen and a paper and write and hand deliver it to the next person that needs it. Right, I use a computer, I use application, I just go use ChatGPT and copy and paste it into an email. That's my job these days. No, but like the concept of actually getting things done is such a broad, kind of aspect of AI. And is it the easier thing? Is it the more low-hanging fruit of this AGI? Because to me, an AGI needs to be able to get things done for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, is that, we talk about, it's not necessarily going to a website. It's going to memorize your API and just is that more of a human problem? Like we have to build systems that the AGI can interact with from a tooling perspective, or is it just going to learn how to do stuff and figure out, how to like, is it sophisticated enough that it's just going to be able to be like, I'll figure this out?
Well, probably a bit of both.
Right.
I mean, we invest really heavily into what we consider like cognitive storage technologies because we just don't believe in humans' abilities to find and organize their data.
Yeah.
And that is the we'll just figure it out. Mm-hmm. Like we don't even want you to try to establish any type of ontology or framework or categorization or like any of the precursor steps to perception where like we're sourcing and acquiring and extracting signals from data. Just stop trying.
Yeah.
And so there are precursors to that. Obviously, like we have to be able to ingest and interpret data like humans do. Because we've spent the last 40 years trying to curate data for computers. That's why we have JSON and XML and SQL databases and everything else. So really, with what language models help us with is the ability to comprehend data that wasn't curated for computers. That's really the big advance.
Right.
Yeah.
That does not make it AGI. That doesn't mean it understands reasoning.
Yeah.
But it kind of like closed that gap for us that now we can use all of this data that was built for humans since time immemorial without kind of like humans rebuilding it all for the computers.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot of like the value of all this is getting the data, making it more accessible, right? So we have all this really, really good data, but to your point, you ask someone to go organize it and catalog it so you can access it. And
we'll come back in 40 years.
Yeah, midway through, they're going to change the cataloging strategy and then have to go do it, and it never gets done. And it's not sustainable to keep upkeep either.
No.
That's why most companies will adopt. We see it all the time. Like they're going to go get some big CRM or some other software, and they're going to say this tool is great. And then 6 months later, no one's using it. Why? Why is no one using it?
Yeah, because they just underestimate like the amount of human toil that goes into making that tool useful.
Yes.
And it's not going to happen.
So, like, are we talking about like a Salesforce, right? So Salesforce rolls out what they call it Einstein, I think. So Einstein's their like AI chat. So you guys are both laughing. Are they a new client of yours that we shouldn't be?
No, they're great.
No.
Salesforce is awesome.
Okay.
But yes, because it is such a powerful tool,
Right.
but it's only as powerful as people are able to leverage
Right.
it.
And then SAP, I saw a thing with SAP.
But let's be
talking
clear,
about-
all these tools, and this isn't to pick on Salesforce or SAP or anything else, but these are systems of record. These are not systems of execution. What everybody wants is a system of execution.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right. So here's a fundamental question. How many chatbots do you have to bolt onto a system of record before it becomes a system of execution? Like here, let's put it in more realistic terms. How many tires do you have to bolt on your car before it becomes a semi?
Well,
If you put 18 tires on your car, is it a semi? Yeah. So like, I don't know that there's a path to getting from a system of record to being a system of execution by just bolting chatbots on top of it.
Is the evolution then like we try that, then we're going to realize that is not a path forward.
We have a whole different generation of systems that are coming out that are built to be systems of work execution.
Yeah.
And these are these like AI operating systems for enterprises where they're pre-built to like do work, not record work.
Right. And that's something that is where like the layman, when people think of AI and AGI, that's where people's brains really go. It's they go, run a diagnostic.
Yeah.
You know, run the diagnostic.
Yeah.
Return the report. Right. Give me this. Not give me this, do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Perform this for me.
Yeah.
And actually, how about just perform all that without me asking and just let me know?
Yeah. If something
When it's
an
done.
anomaly comes up, you tell me.
Right.
Yeah.
But the
Hold a
version
human.
of copilots or chatbots we bolt on top of systems of record, whether that's your OneDrive or your Salesforce, they're basically like a let me Google that for you.
Yeah.
They're not really like they don't understand how to perform work and they're not objective oriented.
Right.
They have no like I hesitate to say they have no purpose because in the casual vernacular they do have a purpose.
But that's the big difference between humans and the LLM, right? Is the human is asked to solve a problem. The human goes and creates a plan to solve that problem, uses their not just the information that they know, but their past memories of them solving those types of problems in the past. Like, for example, I might call Brandon when this certain thing happened, or I might have said, last time I did that, he didn't like that because I didn't highlight the rows this
you have
way.
context.
But then I also figure out what tools I need to use to solve that problem. And I just don't I'm more of a systems integration. Like, how's all this going to work together? Right. Like I might have a CRM, but like you just asked me to go order flowers for the birthday of every single person that's blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
And and Salesforce doesn't have it. So then I think that's kind of the thing. So like we got Einstein over here with our Salesforce data. We got SAP over here with, whatever they call theirs, I don't know. But that there's just huge blind spots that aren't accounted
mostly
for.
blind spots.
But Sean, also, they're not asking you to send flowers on their birthday or whatever. They're asking you to delight that customer with a surprise on a special day to them, right? And in order for them to, and maybe a level deeper, is in order for them to have some sort of loyalty to your brand and come back and buy more, right? So like,
but then we have to give those AI agents an objective, and that objective is customer delight.
Yeah.
And then we have to give them a casual or discrete deductive reasoning process that says, this is how we delight people.
Like with this guy went to Notre Dame, and maybe he, and he looks like he spend some time in Colorado. Maybe he'd want to go see the Colorado Notre Dame football game, in 2028. Like here's the price of those tickets.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Or actually, I don't even. Maybe that's not even enough. You know what I mean?
But when we think of like consciousness and awareness, there's different layers of it. And what you're talking about gets up in like what we would consider the directive layer of like where we have morals and values and priorities. And the comprehension layer and the perception layers are very low foundational layers of cognition. And so like that's what we have to work on is how do you take like morals and values and memory and inject them with comprehension and then give them an objective to perform. And that's really the situational awareness that humans are able to come to and then derive an action plan out of that and then carry out those actions.
Yeah, it's the action plan and then carrying it out. But I still think that maybe the easiest way for that to get done is to create some sort of agent that kind of lives and breathes with you personally and understands you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Apple.
It has memories about you.
Yeah, it has memories about you and the things
it understands your moral system and your value system because it's a personal experience.
It is. Yeah.
Oh
and I don't know how that makes enterprises $1 billion, but you know, it sure could be an easier way just because it would flow the way a life flows.
Well, it makes them $1 bajillion because right now, whether you like it or not, like we can go into a human resources department and
I don't want to.
Like people are expensive, man.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so one of the so let's talk about if we have some people that are working at large enterprises right now and they're thinking about AI, what should these companies, what should these organizations be thinking about in your humble opinion? What should be the first things that they should be trying to think through to prepare for the oncoming onslaught of AI?
Yeah, so obviously they need to be thinking about what does their organizational structure look like in the future? Like what does this do to teams and like leadership? Because you're going to have a new, like we don't even have to talk about like does this or does it not like decimate knowledge workers? Like move past that. But what does like the new manager look like once that happens? When it's like I have to co-manage some people and some agents, right? Like, what does that skill set look like, and how do you measure success in those kind of things?
That's funny. So, like, I don't think we've ever actually talked about this before, but the managers who are used to just managing humans are very well now going to have to also be managing agents,
right?
That is a whole new world that these people have never even considered.
Yep.
Well, because the agent, and I'm maybe stretching this out, but if we're talking about the agents are more successful if they live and breathe as time goes on, the agent kind of becomes its own entity.
Yes. Managing an AI agent is more like managing a human than it is managing a technology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then like when do you update its goals?
Well, at its quarterly review.
Well, but you're not that far off.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't want to do it every time you're pissed off, or you know what I mean. You'd want to do it
every time I'm
you'd
screaming
want to
at
have a well-reasoned, thoughtful review.
You'd have to understand that Sean's a little upset right now. He didn't mean burn it to the ground.
and then do you get to the point where that's where it gets a little scary, where if agents really are successful because they're being given like this runway to live on because they're more valuable as they live on, wouldn't they start exhibiting self-preservation tactics?
But potentially, but
which may or may not be bad.
Yeah, I mean that's not exactly how it works, but we could potentially. But then you've achieved sentience at that point, and we're talking.
That's what I wanted to get to here.
But you can have AGI without sentience,
Right?
Okay.
Right. Just because it can perform like a human doesn't mean it's self-aware.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. And that's what. And just because it tells you it's self-aware doesn't mean that it is.
Right. It could be like, I really want to keep working here, boss.
I mean,
you're still just a bunch of ones and zeros, dude. Chill.
You've met people though, right? How many people could you ask if they're self-aware and you'd be like, yeah, no, you're not.
I mean, honestly, I interact with a lot of different types of people in different roles, and I will say that I would say a good percentage of people just seem to be just kind of a prompt.
Yeah.
And you can guarantee what they're going to fucking say.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Well, we joke about it. We're like, entire companies are a prompt to us. We're like, that's one prompt. That's one prompt.
Well, how many people do you know that guy just says the same story over and over? It's like, dude, you've told me this story before.
Yeah.
Did you not bank that one in that you delivered that one to me?
Well, let's go back to some of those other things, because I think there's some more like present challenges. Like that's a little more forward looking. First of all, is if you can't get your arms around your data, don't try AI. Yeah. Like there's not really any point at that without integrating your organizational data. Yep. It's just like a pretty cool version of autocorrect.
Right. Write me a poem.
Yeah, or write me a script, or like it's like you can do what we would
surface level stuff.
We would consider that task automation. Yeah. So if you look at like American Productivity and Quality Center, there's like tasks, activities, processes, process groups. And so what you're experiencing when you're like, write me this code, that's task automation.
Sure.
Right.
You're not going to go any further than that. You can really get to activity automation by integrating your organization's data to it. And that is not just assistive in nature, where like maybe you're a little bit more productive, but your employees can actually perform at a higher level of expertise. And so it extends their scope of practice. And so we would consider that augmentative. Like you're an augmented human at that point. You can't just do more, but you can do different and higher level things with that.
I see people who like are already pretty expert level in their field who use AI, that it becomes an augmentation of that. Even if they didn't integrate they're integrating their knowledge, like what they know about it. Because when they're writing their prompts, they're saying what their starting point and their assumptions and what the end result needs to be.
Yeah.
And they get fill in the blank sort of situation with a more complete answer.
Yeah.
So you're saying like to do that at a scale, company-wide scale, they have to have their data and then at the activity level.
Yep. Because you can't expect everybody, and you probably shouldn't have everyone writing their own prompts.
Yeah.
And so if you, like in any given department in an organization, if there's 50 people that do accounts receivable, do you really want every one of those having 50 different versions of accounts receivable prompts they're running?
Well, you're right. It's not scalable either to have 50 different people learn this new skill set that you could literally just lift one layer up and then have an expert who does that, or the software.
Well, and then that, like, we talk about it a bit. Like, we're all taking on this whole, like, new wave of tech debt in prompt engineering. Because if you think about, like, the tech debt of we installed servers and we haven't refreshed our hardware, that cycle's like 5 to 7 years or something. The cycle of tech debt and depreciation in a prompt is like a couple of months.
Yeah. I think that's why people get so fatigued and give up on it so quickly, because it's like, well, shit, that's no longer useful, or that doesn't work as well as it used to work 4 or 5 months ago.
Right, because like a new model, or they deprecated that model, or the model drifted, or there's a new set of rules the prompt needs to follow, and I don't have time to rewrite it.
Yeah.
So to me, that's like a body of knowledge thing in symbolic reasoning. And I think in a lot of organizations, that's going to be a service that they consume. Right. Because when you're just writing casual prompts, it's fine to do it yourself. But really, if you're writing finance or legal or healthcare prompts, they should be written by an expert.
Yeah.
They should be validated by domain experts. And then really they should kind of be like locked into that version so they can create repeatable results.
Yeah, well, the locking into the version thing is almost like it would be a piece of the audit that they would need to go through.
Yeah,
every
but
single
name
time.
one prompt version control system. Well,
it would I came from an IT audit background, and I would be adding that to
like we do. We're just adding version control to our whole cognitive studio, so you can be like. Yep. It gets its own GUID that you can call via an API.
Yeah, you're going to need all that stuff. Because it has to be verifiable. Like if I don't know what version this thing went through, right? It's I can't place reliance on it.
No.
Right. Are we going to blow right past this though, as far as like from an educational standpoint? Because I remember I had Mavis Beacon. I learned how to type, right? And that's a fundamental thing. I still need to know how to type. But like, are we going to teach kids or at
prompt engineering?
At some now, so. It's just going to be
it'll be ubiquitous. It'll be
well, but so, and we've kind of talked about this kind of the idea of a kind of a cognitive, a cognitive team that is literally the people who are going to ultimately be the ones who are writing the prompts, who are really trying to understand the problem statement, trying to understand how we actually get it.
That.
Yeah, but do you think that those types of groups start forming within these organizations?
In the organization,
or is it more of an outside?
I'm still like maybe.
Right.
Because typically when we put AI groups together, they're like super concerned with like the nuts and bolts and plumbing. They're not that concerned with like the business application and the reasoning processes behind it.
They're still trying to figure out, can we get our data?
Yeah, that's more of like a psychology discipline than it is a technology discipline.
Right.
Because it requires us, so we'll sit down with groups of people and we'll be like, okay, you perform a task. Now, what we need to do is harvest that reasoning or how that's performed and create that neurosymbology, right? Of we're going to have an AI do it the same way you do it. So that's a practice called metacognition, right? Like we think about thinking. And it's one of the hardest things for people to do. And so in order to be a really good prompt engineer, you have to think about how you think about performing a task. And it's really difficult for people to do. And it's it's a precursor to good prompt engineering. Yeah. And so there's so many like base level skills you would have to teach people that I don't see that being a practical.
And it's why most people I think give up on it too, because it's so hard to sit and it took me a long time when I started prompting of like, sitting in front of an empty screen and being like, okay, how am I going to ask this? What am I what am I trying to get at here? And then it's like learning how to Google really well, but like another couple layers up where you're like,
but harder.
Yeah. Because like Google is more effective when you know what the problem is already, and you can ask very good, curated, detailed questions.
Yep.
Same thing, but like way worse or way more detailed. So
and we see that in a lot of different ways because there's even like that concept of attention management. And so what people want to do is be like, hey, I have 10,000 HR, employee survey responses. So what I should do is just boom them into a model and be like, is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's how this works. And they're like, why doesn't it know?
Yeah.
Well, really, if you think about it, like if I asked you that, like, can you pay attention to all the survey results at one time? You would be like, no, of course not. I can read one result at a time. And I can analyze its sentiment one at a time. And then I would accrue all of that sentiment analysis and I would post-process that.
Well, isn't that where you would coach them? You need a layer in between the raw data and the...
Yep. I did that with some NBA data.
Model. I mean,
remember we went through this exercise where we had a bunch of NBA data, and I was like, all right, I got a bunch of data here. I want to figure out who the best team is, but I don't know how to define that. Help me define that first. Here's the data set. And they were like, okay, you could do this, this, and this. How does that sound? And I made some adjustments, and then I gave it the data set, and it came back with a pretty decent result. But if I just dumped that Excel file in there and I was like, who's the best? It might have figured it out,
but you may not even fit it all in the context window.
Yeah.
It may have truncated half of your data,
and you don't even know.
And you don't even know.
Yeah. But that's part of the misuse, I think, at the enterprise level of these LLMs.
Oh yeah,
I've walked into. Well, I didn't walk into. We had to help a company get prepared for AI, and it was the board was like very very concerned about AI. We need to do something about AI. At first, they were very bullish. Let's do stuff, and then it eventually turned to security. We're gonna get hacked, because like they were on the board of a company that had been hacked, and which is happening a lot. Had nothing to do with AI, but like the first thing that they did in this board meeting is they started Googling themselves. That was what they did.
But like I sit on a bunch of boards and we work with a bunch of them, and it's just like they have a freaking Ouija board. They're just like it said AI. We should totally do it, you guys.
But like, you know what I mean? Like there's some context that's involved in all this. And I think it's like, what are you trying to accomplish? And I think that really from what you're saying is you're categorizing these different capabilities, whether it's reasoning or comprehension, like understand the tooling of what you're doing. Cause AI is a very broad term.
So broad.
And AGI even that's a broad, I don't even know how to.
But that's where we don't think in most organizations, like they need a consumable. And they need to be able to validate the authenticity and the accuracy of that consumable. But like beyond that, I don't know that people like build this for themselves. Yeah. And so we have to have like here's the nutrition label, right? And that's what we work on. Like, what model was used, what data was used, but like trying to do it yourself. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Like we work with huge companies. And like 2 years ago, everyone was like, this is amazing. And then they were like, oh, I don't know, this is kind of hard. Like, but we're going to like build all this stuff ourselves. And now they're like, we flipped our bike over and knocked our 2 front teeth out. But also we got everybody like lathered up about how great it was going to be. So what do we do now?
Yeah,
how do we deliver something? And the answer is like we have to massively deploy consumable, like objective-oriented artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
But that's like click a button, attach a file, click a button, run a search, click a button and do nothing, and it comes back to you with the right outputs. Right. And that's a harder nut to crack than people want to think.
100%.
Yeah, I'm still fine with my just casual problem-solving ChatGPT to augment my day. But I've unfortunately learned that that is just the absolute basic layer tip of the iceberg of this whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the biggest organizations are having trouble getting to the next layer, so you should feel good about that.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, they really are, right?
But like this is the arms race.
Exactly.
Like the ones that do.
Yeah. Well, so the ones that, to your point earlier, and we had this podcast, go back to the Aubrey and On podcast from last year. Don't touch this stuff if you don't have your data together.
There's no point.
There's no point.
No point.
That's step
if you
one.
can't get to your data, there's no reason to even spend time
and
on
if you're looking at, if you're looking at companies that be successful, just talk to your friends. Like if they're in IT, which companies were creating massive amounts of tech debt and constantly just paying money to keep the lights on, and which ones were advancing and layering up.
Exactly.
Because those are the companies that are going to be able to even touch going past, securely prompting ChatGPT.
Right. All right. So, Aaron, thank you. If people want to learn more about you and your business, how do they do that?
Well, they can certainly learn about our business. I don't know about me. I'm going to live in a cabin and write a manifesto at some point.
I'd read it.
Yeah. I'd definitely go to just promptprivacy.com and check it out.
Awesome. And it was designed by somebody that you know.
Try not to knock anything over.
I'm trying not to break it. Anyway, so this wraps up our, I think, 6th episode of season 2 of the Big Cheese Podcast. So everybody, thank you very much. Make sure to subscribe and like, and we will see you next weekend. Week? We'll see you next week.
Yeah. See you.
Bye.